Hello everybody, this is Brian O'Haron on a cold, rainy day, November 13th, 2008, sitting here while the rest of the world is falling apart. For comments today and for the foreseeable future, I will discuss talk about the major revenue opportunities for the town of Winchester, because this is the main purpose of the program since its inception, and in addition to fiscal responsibility, which is very, very critical for our town. I've always said so. See my green papers, town hall, on ideas on how to cut the budget and keep the budget responsible, that I garnered from other town leaders of past and present. It's more important now. Everywhere I look, I see where we're going to be getting less money over the next few years. We could be in pretty dire straits here, so it's very important to be fiscally responsible until we can get more revenue and more taxpayers into the town to help us share the load. So this revenue is the main need of this town for the short, mid, and long term, in my opinion, coupled with fiscal responsibility. This program tonight will be about the Aurora Estates development. You'll see a picture of it. That was discussed in a public hearing on Monday, November 10th, 2008. The public hearing lasted a couple hours, and then there was another hour of the planning and zoning people reviewing the public input, and I sat through all that. I will discuss the progress of the joint agreement that I mentioned in previous weeks between the developer and the town of Winchester to satisfy the Litchfield Court, and imminent decision concerning the permit. I will discuss some of the conditions that will accompany the granting of the permit should it occur. I will discuss a bit about the next important steps by the town that are necessary to proceed with the project. So now I'd just like to show you the agenda for this evening. We already talked about the comments. I'm going to talk about the fifth proposed budget very, very shortly and succinctly tonight. I'm going to talk about the Aurora Estates public hearing that was held on November 10th, Monday night, some next steps, and then I'll discuss conditions of the planning and zoning, not in total detail because there are too many to discuss in 1 hour, and also of in the wetlands for the Aurora Estates project. The fifth 2008-2009 town budget meeting will be held at 11 a.m. Saturday, November 22nd, 2008 at the Gilbert School. Now it's a Saturday morning at 11 a.m., so make special note of that. Usually these are held in the evening during the week. This is an exception, so pay particular attention to that. The proposed tax increase, 0.58 mils, or 2.34%, will be discussed. The opportunity for the town people to reduce the budget at the town meeting, but not to increase it. The last town meeting and referendum proposal was 3.87% increase, and that was denied. 1 mil today equals $816,900, and this proposal is for 0.58 a mil. Now we'll talk a bit about planning and zoning meeting on November 10th. First thing I want to do is try to go over, for those of you who are not familiar with how these land use boards work, I want to go over the approach. You'll see a picture of the Route 8 corridor here of great concern to the town and its future. either behind me or in front of me or somewhere, but it'll be up. And I've marked on there some of the key buildings and where these estates are on the map, where the town garage is, where the state building is, and where the sewer ends up at the top of close to the town, where the retail businesses are there, just before you get to the park. So the first thing that happens is a person comes in, and he has an application. So he puts in an application to planning and zoning and inland wetlands, and he includes a fee. He has to pay the fee for both. Inland wetlands has a fee, planning and zoning has a fee. The planning and zoning fee, pretty hefty. He also has to commit to pay for consultants that the town will use to review his application, his or her application. There'll be a public hearing for these major applications, and at the public hearing, the public presentation by the applicant and his experts, engineers, golf course designers, wetlands experts, all kinds of experts come in, and they go through the presentation of what the project is going to be and all the detail of the project. And this is done in public meetings. Anybody can sit and go through that, and anybody can get at the documents, get a copy of the documents. They're pretty lot of documents, but if you wanted to, you could go down to the planning and zoning or inland wetlands office, which are the same in the city and town hall, and you can either look at the information or you can get copies of it. All these meetings are, of course, recorded on disc. So if you want to hear any of the meetings, you can go and get a copy of the disc from the town hall, and then you can listen to it. Some of them last quite a bit of time, 3 to 6 hours sometimes. So they're pretty long. They're generally not televised unless it's done by somebody from the public, televises them, gives them to channel 13 and 15, and they play them there. And that happens quite a bit. And those are quite useful. The November 10th meeting, public hearing, was televised by somebody, and I already saw it shown once on channel 15, 7 o'clock, and it'll probably be shown again once or twice. So if you want to see the whole meeting, what happened at the meeting, I'll be just giving you some brief picture of it tonight. But if you want to see it, either call up channel 13 or 15 and ask them when they plan to show it again, and then you can watch it from start to finish, record it if you want. There's also public review by the commission and experts. So what happens after this presentation is made and everybody from the public asks all the questions they want, then there's a public review by the commission and their experts. So they have experts as well, and these experts are in general paid for by the developer. And I can't say that's 100% of the time, but it's most of the time. Then what happens is there's either an approval or denial. If after many weeks of discussions and barter between the lawyers and the engineers of both sides, and all the commission members and any invited speakers, they will either approve with conditions, and most of these conditions will be agreed by both parties. Otherwise, it's not an approval. So the approval, then they argue about these conditions for months and months, because some of them are very important, some have legal implications, some engineering implications. Both sides have to agree with them. Trade-offs have to be made. So it's a complex thing. Now, on this particular one that we're going over now, Aurora Estates, from the meeting on November 10th, there are about 126 conditions, and I'll brief you on those this evening so you get a rough idea what's happening. I do want to say here, I'm just giving you a picture of what's happening here. If you want to know the actual facts and you want to go down to the town hall and talk to planning and zoning, then you can get more detail and you can then update yourself onto exactly what's happening. Here I'm just trying to give you an idea, introduce it to you in kind of layman's terms. I'm not a lawyer, I'm not an engineer, so you'd have to go down there and really read all the documents or listen to the CDs if you really want to know exactly what was happening. Anyway, so if there's an approval, it's agreed with conditions. If there's a denial, it's usually denied with reasons. Too dense for the area, not enough this, not enough that, that kind of thing. So when that happens and it's denied, there is a possibility of appeal in the courts. And that's what's happened here. The developer came in with a proposal for 300 units, and that was turned down, denied with certain reasons. One was the density. I think there were a couple other reasons too. Too far from the fire department, too far from the police department, that kind of thing. It was denied. So what happened was the developer went to the Litchfield court and he put in for an appeal in the court. And once people go in for an appeal with the court, then of course the court says, well, go away and try to work it out amongst yourselves if you can. That'd be the easiest way. So that introduces the possibility of a compromise between the town and the developer. Now, that's what's happening right now with the Aurora Estates. They did go to the Litchfield court when they were denied for the 300 units or whatever number of units it was then, and they reduced. It came back. The town introduced a possible compromise of 225 units with some other changes too involved, and they've been talking about that for about 5 months or so, and they finally got to the point now where they almost have an agreement between the town of Winchester and Planning and Zoning and the developer on a set of conditions, 126 of them, that would allow them to get a permit, all else being equal, for the 225 units that you will see on that will be up off the corridor on the Torrington end by Mountain Avenue, up in that area. You should see that sticker on the map if you can see it. Now, if denied and he doesn't win his court appeal, or if denied and he doesn't want to go to court, any applicant can resubmit another application with changes and begin the process again. They would have to pay a new fee, they would have a new application, and that application I don't think they can just submit the same application again. That wouldn't make any sense. They have to have some changes in there to try to meet the conditions for which the original application was denied. So they would go back and they would try to make it, bend it so it would satisfy the Planning and Zoning Commission. Now, I do want to say a bit about the purview of this whole situation, so that you have a pretty good feel what's happening here. Purview is a very important word when you deal with land use boards, and I've defined purview here for you. In a minute I will do that, but the town land use boards must follow state statutes and the town charter and various town ordinances. There are rules which these commission members, both in the wetlands and planning and zoning, have to follow. They just can't make up their own rules. They can't just do that kind of thing. So they have to be very careful. And all this stuff here is called their purview. And when I define purview here, the body, purview has, we've got 3 different definitions from Webster here. The body or enacting part of a statute as part of the purview. The range or limit of authority, competence, responsibility, concern, or attention. That's part of the purview. The range of vision, understanding, or cognizance. Now, I will give you a couple of ideas about what is within not within the purview. For example, if the developer is responsible for selling these units that will or will not be approved for Aurora Estates. It's not within the purview of planning and zoning to question that. They can't say, we're going to deny this to you because we don't think you can sell these units. There's other things that are same kind of examples, the national and international and local economy. And there are various issues like that that these commission members don't take into consideration because it's not within their purview. Now, I'm not going to tell you all these things. I don't even know them all, but I do know that's one of the reasons why we have lawyers involved with these big, complex developments. Both the lawyer, the town attorney, and the development lawyer, they do a lot of work, and it costs a lot of money to do that, because they have to interpret the statutes and make sure that the commission stays within the purview. The town attorney has to do that for the town, and the developer has to keep reminding them that. Now, when we have a public hearing like we had on November 10th, on Monday, a lot of people bring up many issues. Anybody can come from the public. Anybody can come, and anybody can speak, and anybody can say whatever they want to say. And a lot of what they do say when they come, and thank them for coming, there's no argument there, is not within the purview of the Planning and Zoning Commission, or even the Inland Wetlands Commission. But these commissions like to hear everybody. They like to have everybody speak. They like to have everybody state their case and feel that they were heard, whether it's within the purview or not. Now, once in a while, you'll find the chairman say, that's not within our purview, and politely explain to people that perhaps we shouldn't talk about that anymore because we got 3 hours worth of work to do here. They don't say it that way, but basically that's the thing. So there were plenty of stuff. I would say a good percentage of what happened on Monday night was not within the purview, but it was still 2 hours of public comment, which was heard before the public hearing was closed, about 2 hours worth. Now I just want to show you once again what the thing is here, and that's up back of me. You see the GIS helped map on there of the corridor between Winston and Torrington down the Route 8 corridor, and you'll see where some of the buildings are. But because that's such a beautiful picture and it's kind of confusing and small and you can't read anything there, I use it mainly for effect here. I'm going to show you once again this little Route 8 corridor map that I use. This is the Winston end, this is Torrington, Winston, Mountain Road goes up here. The Aurora Estates that we're going to be talking about tonight is Aurora Estates 225 units. 100 units are age restricted, meaning only people 55 and over can buy them and live in them. And the other one is already approved by the town Planning and Zoning Commission, and it's approved by the Inland Wetlands. And it's called Highland Ridge Estates. It's also up here in the mountain. I've marked it on the big map you see in back of me. And it also has St. Anne's Country Club here, 18-hole, state-of-the-art type golf course, and that will have a clubhouse. There'll be employees here, and you know, this will be all 456 units, I'm pretty sure I'm right on that number, will be age restricted. It means only people that are above the age of 55 and older can live here. There are a few exceptions for somebody who has perhaps has a child that must live with them for some reason, but not many. Basically, all these here will be. So in total, we're going to have, between these two projects, 680 total units, a golf course, a clubhouse, and many amenities like playing fields and that kind of thing, recreational facilities, parks, spare space. There'll be like 150 acres at least of open space in the land preserve, things like that. So that's where they are, up in the, going from Winston to Torrington on the right-hand side, down the bottom of the corridor. Now, in order for them to operate, we got to get water and sewer down there. It's not down the corridor right now, so once we get the water and sewer down there, that will be the responsibility of the developer to get the water from the state garage down to his property, both properties, for the houses. And then in the end, of course, he'll be charged for each house a water fee and a sewage fee, just like everybody else is in town for each building. And it's his responsibility to get the sewer line, at least from the state garage, Public Works garage, down to these properties. And it may be even that he's going to be responsible for getting them from this, I say center on this map. That's where we have some buildings at the top of the corridor, by the bridge there, right at the top of the corridor. And that's where kind of the sewer stops right now. So the town has to work out with the developer how we're going to get the sewer between the state garage and the center where the sewer stops now. So those are things that we're going to talk about later. There are things that yet have to be done. Now, once the sewer and water is run down the corridor, then we have the synergy that I talked about last week, where other people, for example, the state garage can use the sewer, and Public Works will be able to use the sewer, and all the other people in the corridor, and most of them are marked on this map. By the way, the map you see in back of me, you can get it from Planning and Zoning. You can get a copy of that. And they also have huge ones that you can read a little better. But if you want a copy of the corridor and how everything's laid out down there, there is this map, which was done as part of the POCD development for the new POCD upgrade that's happening. So once we get this agreed, the permit, then we got to start working on getting the water and sewer lines down there, come to an agreement with the developer, and get all that agreed. And then there's a possibility a developer might have to deal with the state on that, and that might take some time. But now the developer for Aurora Estates does not have to go to state DEP and to the state. The lights just went out here for some reason. I think one of the lights went, so I hope you can still see me. Anyway, that is, they don't have to worry about going to the state DEP or the Army Corps of Engineers, because of the size of their and complexity of their project isn't big enough. Highland Ridge does have to go. They already have their local permits from the town, but they do have to go to the state DEP and the Army Corps of Engineers and for approval, because they fit the criteria for needing approval for the golf course and maybe some other things that they're doing there. So that could take a year, maybe more, before that approval gets done. So that brings up the possibility that this may be done before this one that was approved probably a year or so ago. So it gets very interesting here, but the important thing is to get it going, get the water and sewer lines down the corridor so that we get the synergistic effects, and then the corridor can be developed in parallel. While they're doing that, we can have other businesses go in here. And again, the reason why the corridor is important, water and sewer is important in the corridor, is because there's a lot of slate down there, and you can't put in septic tanks unless you're 4 foot above the rock and stuff. And the water is important because if you have industrial things down here and buildings and industrial parks, then you need to have sprinkling systems which require the pressure that comes from getting the city water down there. And of course, all these people will pay hookup fees, and they'll pay usage fees, and they'll pay taxes. So this is a big boon for the town once it gets going and gets on. And it'll be evolutionary. There'll be a little done each year. Probably won't feel the first real impacts for 5, maybe more years, especially in this economy. Now, I want to say quickly that it is important to get permits done and get them over with so they're in your pocket. And then when the economy clears up and gets better, maybe 5 years from now or whatever, then we're ready to go. And we can even start before that if somebody feels it's important to do so. For example, get the water and sewer in and get all the infrastructure in before we begin to build the houses. And we don't get much money for this, but we do get the developer to pay for all this, and that's multi-millions of dollars to do that. All right, so that's what we're talking about. That's what the public hearing was about. And I now want to say that the public hearing, application number 08-01, proposed negotiated settlement to establish a planned development zone, Mountain Road and Torrington Road. That's the Aurora Estates. In response to an appeal of a decision by Planning and Zoning. The first project, 300 units, was denied. There was an appeal made, and this meeting was about the response to that appeal by Planning and Zoning. There was a draft settlement paper presented at the meeting. Anybody could get a copy of that. You still can get a copy from the Town Hall Planning and Zoning Department. And that draft settlement listed the 126 conditions. There was also a straw vote taken, so it was 4-2, 4-1 for the what I call the first team of Planning and Zoning, and then there's an alternate who doesn't get the vote on this, but did vote on the straw poll, and he voted negative. So it was 4 in favor, 2 negative in the Monday straw vote. That's not the final vote. There still has plenty of work to be done before that can happen. So 225 multifamily residential dwelling units consisting of 100 age-restricted condominiums and 125 unrestricted condominiums and associated amenities. And the Wetlands has already approved this 225 units because they had approved the 300 units, and this is less than that. So I'm told by the in the Wetlands director that this is not a problem for inland wetlands. So once the Planning and Zoning agrees and the permit is issued, then that's the end of that. Then they proceed to try to resolve the water and sewer issues and keep on trying to get the golf course for Highland Ridge Estates and St. Anne's Country Club resolved with the DEP and the Army Corps of Engineers. It's the application and property of Winchester Estates, LLC. That's who, when we deal with Aurora Estates, we're really dealing with the LLC, Winchester Estates here. So Aurora Estates, the public hearing was attended by various residents. You can see it on TV if it's going to be repeated. Probably on Channel 15 over the next week, maybe Saturday night, maybe tonight. I don't know when it'll be done, but if you tune in at 7, Channel 15 each night, you might catch it and you can watch it. Or call Channel 13 Charter Communications down here and ask them when it's going to be played, or ask them to play it. I think they can do that. Nothing to do with me. That was taken by another party, and they're in charge of that. To discuss, so the public hearing was attended by various residents. There are probably 25, 30 residents there, mostly from the Highland Lake District, to discuss the draft settlement agreement to resolve the developer's Litchfield Superior Court case. Public comment was allowed at the beginning of the meeting, and anybody could get up and say whatever they wanted to at the beginning of the meeting. And most of the people who spoke were not in favor of approving this Aurora Estates project. There are some other reasons for that, and we'll go into them maybe a little later. A brief presentation was made by the developers, attorney, and the developer's engineer. And his brief presentation was basically what's the difference between the 300 unit application that was denied and the 225 unit application that is now in the process of trying to be resolved. Questions and answers from the commission members, their consulting engineer, and the public followed. So after the presentation, the commission members, their consulting engineer, and the public were allowed to ask questions. There were a lot of questions asked, and the whole thing took about 2 hours. Throughout the 2-hour public meeting, all participants spoke freely, including the public, and some even submitted papers. And those papers automatically, once submitted, become part of the public record, and you, anybody who's watching this program, or anybody in town, or anybody from Connecticut, I guess, or maybe even the United States, I don't know, can go down there and get a copy of these papers and read them for themselves. Of course, the press is always there from 3 or 4 of the local papers, and they do pick up copies of these and read them, and if they see anything they want to publish in the papers, they go ahead and do that. Most people pointed out concerns of most of the public most of the public discussion was pointing out concerns about the conditions in the proposal. And a lot of this should say proposal here, but a lot of these were all good questions. Some weren't within the purview, but they were all good questions. They were intelligent questions, and people did ask them. They weren't shy about asking questions and making suggestions. A few pointed out concerns about the developer's past experience, whether they thought that would be wise to use this developer in our town or not. Again, that may or may not be within the purview of planning and zoning. Others pointed out concerns about the chances of the project success in this economy. Again, question, I don't know for sure, but it's questionable whether that's within the purview of the Planning and Zoning Commission as well. The lawyers will know, and if you want to know any of that, just go down and talk to Charlie Carno, who's the Planning and Zoning and EDC Director in the Town Hall. Some people pointed out concerns about the consequences of failure. What happens if we start this project, we cut down all the trees, and then the developer goes bankrupt, okay, so, or broke, or whatever. So that's a concern of a lot of people, quite rightly. Others thought that a new application and fee was in order. Several people spoke and said, look, we shouldn't be going forward to resolve this issue with the court without asking for another application and fee from the developer and going through the whole process again. And that was asked by 2 or 3 of the people that were there. Following the closing of the public hearing, the commissioners, attorneys, and engineers reviewed the public comment, discussing and honing conditions as a result. That went on for another hour after that. So it was a 3-hour meeting, televised and recorded on CD, and about 30 people there. There were a bunch of consultants there, there were attorneys there, and there were the commission members themselves, and newspaper people, and myself, who was interested in the progress. There were some selectmen there as well, I think the mayor was there for at least a short while. So it's pretty important to this town, this project, as is Highland Ridge. So everybody is interested. Now, doesn't mean it'll be a piece of cake. Doesn't mean it won't have a lot of problems in the implementation. That's almost a given with any large development. That's just another thing we have to be more careful of once these permits are approved. The Aurora Estates next steps. The decision to agree the settlement was tabled until perhaps November 24th, 2008. So these 126 conditions were not approved at this meeting on November 10th. We didn't really expect them to be, but we made a great step forward. There was a straw vote taken, and there's some things going to happen now to bring this to a head. So the decision to agree to the settlement was tabled until perhaps November 24th, 2008. Following wording changes required to answer a few remaining questions, and a special meeting to be held by the Planning and Zoning Commission on Tuesday, November 18, 2008, a clean settlement document will be produced. So the intention now is they did all this for an hour at the meeting the other night, discussed all the input from all the people that were there, and gave public input. There was some of the public input that didn't totally resolve. They wanted to do that offline, and the lawyers had to talk about a few things, and the designers a few things, engineers, I mean. So what they're doing is they're going to have a meeting which anybody can attend on November 18, 2008, and that's where they hope to end up with a clean settlement document of the 126 or even more, if they add a couple more or take away a couple, that will be done. And then a regular meeting will be held on November 24th, 2008. Again, public invited, so public meeting, when a final decision may be made. I always hedge these things because although it's their intention to make a final decision, you never know what might have come up between now and then to change their mind or to ask for more information or to delay this even further. So, so that's what's going to happen. A straw vote was taken on November 10th, 2008, and 4 of the 5 commissioners voted in favor and 1 against. The remaining alternate also voted against. Now, the alternate will only get a vote should somebody be absent on the night of the voting. So it looks like this, if they keep going the way they're going here and everything goes properly the way they intended, this will probably be approved on November 24th by at least 3-2, but maybe even 4-1. It depends on whether the alternate gets seated on that night or not, and it depends on who he replaces. If he replaces a yes vote, then it'll be 3-2. If he replaces a no vote, it'll be 4-1. And some people here might even change their mind between now and then. So there's no guarantee this thing will be approved, but that's kind of the direction everybody's heading in now. And then from there, it will go up to the Litchfield Court, and they'll have both attorneys there, one from the town attorney and the developer's attorney. The judge will look at it. He'll make sure they both agree to those terms, and then we'll be in a position to issue a permit to the developer to get on with the work. But he must follow the conditions. Now, these conditions are so important that I thought I'd talk a bit about them to you tonight so you can see what the categories are, and you can see roughly how many conditions are in each category. And then if I get time, I'll even talk about a few of the conditions so you can get a feel for how thoroughly this thing has been looked at, how thoroughly it's been discussed, how professionally it's been handled, and you can see that this is not a fly-by-night situation. The town's done a very good job in reviewing this. Various agencies in the town, associations and all, have been in a very good job questioning this and asking questions and bringing up points. The developer himself has done a wonderful job. Some people tell me they think this is one of the best engineering jobs they've seen in a long, long time for a development. Of course, it is one of the bigger developments we have, too. Not as big as Highland Ridge, which is 456 units age-restricted, but it's still a big unit development for our town. So, now here we go. We have some important conditions, plus there are other things in here besides just conditions. So, planning and zoning, 126 total for planning and zoning. We'll talk about inland wetlands towards the end of the program. So the first category are general conditions. They're number 1 through 65. Then there's a second category called blasting and rock removal. That's a big area of interest for our town because we don't want to affect any wells or the Canavo Spring or anybody's personal wells anywhere. So the blasting and the rock removal is very important consideration for the Planning and Zoning Commission. Those are conditions number 66 through 73. The next important condition is we said, hey, what happens if this project gets started, we cut the trees down, and then the project developer goes broke or something like that? Well, we have to have bonds to cover that kind of thing. So there are a whole bunch of things going on. Or if he misuses, doesn't follow directions, doesn't do what he said he was going to do, all that kind of stuff. So that's number 74 through 81 of the conditions. If you go down and pick up a copy of the conditions down at the town hall, I got a copy here, I'll show you. This is a copy of the conditions. I got a little scribbling on mine, but you know, I'll list them all out. They're all in here. You can read them verbatim for yourself. Probably take you an hour to read through this and understand it. It's all very simple English, nothing complex in here. There are some technical terms that you would probably have to get defined for you by somebody in the town hall, but you can get a copy of this report yourself, these 126 conditions. And right now it's a draft copy. It's not an approved copy, but it's on its way. The next, and very important, of course, is the water and wastewater systems conditions. Number 4. That's the 4th category. That's 82 through 101. A whole bunch of conditions there that they have to follow and they have to stick to once the permit is agreed. The next is the roadways. There's a bunch of conditions for roadways that will go, everywhere they work on roadways. They will be building the roadways at their expense, and they have to follow certain conditions they've already agreed to if this thing is approved. That's number 102 through 104. The next category is drainage. Drainage, conditions 105 through 112 is very important, especially for people at the lake and for people in the town, neighbors and everybody else. They don't want a lot of water draining into their property. And what's happened is the engineers have gone over this for many months, and they've worked out all the plans, and so they would be safe once they were implemented. The 7th category is a category called specific conditions, and those are stipulations for the 225 units that are going to be in the Aurora Estates. There are 113 through 126. Condition number 113, 114, 115, etc. to 126. Then there are some appendices that are not with this list I have of 126, but you can get these appendices from the Planning and Zoning Director. And Appendix A, the duties of the site monitor. This is very important. There were a lot of questions raised about these site monitor, and what's basically going to happen here is the developer's going to pay for the town to have a site monitor, and there are a whole bunch of rules that the site monitor has to follow and a bunch of rules the developer has to follow, and those are the conditions that are in this appendix, and called duties of the site manager, A through M. Appendix B are a listing of various plans, reports. It's like an index of plans, reports, drawings, fiscal impact analysis, etc. They're just an index of what's available. Now, if you were interested in any of those, you'd have to go get the draft of these plans, the drafts of the reports, the drafts of the drawings that are mentioned in this appendix when you get it. Appendix C are additional documents in support of the 225 unit settlement. And in there are plans for the 225 units and construction sequences. The construction sequences are very important, and a lot of time was spent on that by the engineers and the lawyers and the planners and the planning and zoning commissioners over the months to make sure that everybody was happy and could agree to a responsible set of construction sequences. Doesn't mean they're perfect. It's the best they could do with the capability they had available to them over the last few years. Number 11, Appendix D, a statement of the use for the Aurora Estates 225 unit residential development. So that's kind of it for planning and zoning meeting, and the document that you can get for yourself from the planning and zoning director down at the town hall for this Aurora Estates project that will be going into the final steps over in November, and perhaps to the Litchfield Court, agreed to by the developer and the town of Winchester. And then following that, a permit will be produced, and then the developer can start to resolve how he's going to get the water and sewer to his property. There'll be meetings with the Water and Sewer Commission. I'm going to go to some of those meetings. There's one next Tuesday at 7 o'clock, and I'm going to go there and try to get a feel for where we stand on getting the water and sewer down the corridor and up to these two properties. And it turns out now that it looks like, because the state has made some changes over the last year or two, few months I guess, that it will be easier than we had originally anticipated. And some discussion has to happen with the town about getting the sewer from the bridge on the top of the corridor near Main Street down to the town garage. From the town garage on, the developer is certain to do that. There is some question and some confusion in that area between the bridge and the town garage, and that will be resolved, I'm sure, over time, so we're not too worried about that. The next thing I wanted to go and show you is, just so you can see, I never know whether I should say inland wetlands or inland wetlands, but anyway, the Inland Wetlands Commission has already approved this project, and they've approved with standard conditions and conditions. All these big, large, complex projects, and even small projects, like if you want to add a porch onto your house, they have conditions. You know, you got to put up a silt fence, and you can't do this, and you got to do that, and you know they have various conditions that they attack. They're called kind of standard conditions. But anyway, the inland wetlands for this Aurora Estates project has already standard conditions 1 through 12. You can read those. I also have that report here. That's a report of the conditions for the inland wetlands group. I got that from Planning and Zoning the last day or two. Same sort of thing. And actually this comes from the law office of Kevin Nelligan to Scott Eisenlohr, the enforcement officer. Okay, so these are, all the conditions are in this report. The next category is specific conditions, number 13 through 48. Those are specific conditions. So if you want to know what the specific conditions are, you read number 13 through 48. The next category is Schedule B, the final design items to be incorporated. And there are 11, 1 through 11, 12 altogether, yes. And Schedule C is the next category, and that's the revised construction sequence. And number 1 through 11 in that category. Erosion control, maintenance inventory table. So there's a whole table in there, kind of complex to read, which is the erosion control maintenance interval table. The next category is the Aurora Estates roadway and unit construction. Looks like that'll be done in 3 phases. Phase 1 is question 1 through 24. Phase 2 has 1 through 24 questions, and Phase 3 has 1 through 24 questions. So already got 72 questions or so there just on the roadway and unit construction alone. Schedule D is guidelines for site monitoring team. A bunch of guidelines in there, makeup and credentials, A through C, and numbers 1 through 4. The monitoring tasks category, pre-construction is 1 through 9. Post-construction monitoring is numbered 1 through 3. So if you want to see what the monitoring tasks pre-construction are, you just read this section here. And then post-construction, wetlands and watercourse maintenance post-construction. There are 10 questions there for that. So I have a little time left, not much, maybe 5 minutes. I want to say now that I thought what I'd do is read a few of these to you, so you could get a feel for what they are. Just get this report out. I'll just give you an idea what some of these are. I hope I can do some of the wetland, but I can't do 126 of them, so let's just read a couple to you. None of them are small. They're all a paragraph or so, but under general conditions, the applicant permittee shall notify the zoning enforcement officer in writing prior to the commencement of work and upon its completion. I'm going to try to read you some of the shorter ones. There's plenty of them here. Number 6. If the activity authorized by this permit also involves activity or a project that requires approval from any other governmental entity, no work pursuant to this permit may begin until such approval is obtained. Number 7. The applicant, permittee, contractor, and/or owner shall conduct all operations at the site in full compliance with this permit, to the extent provided by law, may be held liable for any violations of the terms and conditions of this permit, and are responsible for any violation they may have created. Number 10, I'm just picking them at random here. If any changes in the final plans are required, either before, during, or after construction, such changes must be submitted and approved in writing by the Commission or its designated agent prior to the activity taking place. Failure to submit such changes or failure to obtain such approvals may result in suspension or termination of this permit. Number 12, during construction, the applicant, permittee, or its designated representative shall meet with the ZEO, Zoning Enforcement Officer, and the monitor on at least a monthly basis to review all site activity and schedules, including effectiveness of erosion and sediment control measures, and to make necessary revisions to reflect field conditions as may be appropriate. Number 14, there shall be no grading, clearing, landscaping, excavation, or deposition of materials beyond the proposed construction areas as depicted on the approved plans without further approval by the Commission. One of the things you'll notice when you read through these conditions is everything must be told in advance that it's going to meet the plans and subject to review along the way, and then if something's going to change, they have to go back to the Planning and Zoning Commission for permission to do that. Now I'm going to switch for a minute to the wetland ones, just to give you an idea of the flavor of that, of what theirs are. Again, we'll pick some at random here. There's some preamble to all this that you can read for yourself. The permittee shall notify the Inland Wetlands Enforcement Officer at 738-6980 2 weeks prior to commencement. This authorization is not transferable without written notice to the Inland Wetlands and Watercourses Agency. Any such notice must provide, at a minimum, the name, telephone number, and business address of the owner of the property. Number 2, a contact person to whom all communication from the agency regarding this permit may be made. In evaluating this application, the Inland Wetlands Agency has relied on information provided by the applicant, and such information is substantially proved to be false, incomplete, or misleading. This permit may be modified, suspended, or revoked, and the permittee may be subject to any other remedies or penalties provided by law. Number 7, no equipment or material, including, without limitation, fill, construction materials, or debris, shall be deposited, placed, or stored in any wetland or watercourse or any regulated area on or off-site unless specifically authorized by this permit. Now, we will have a site monitor there, as you saw in the thing, to be looking all the time at this kind of stuff and enforcing the rules. The permittee, contractor, and/or owner shall conduct all operations at the site in full compliance with this permit, to the extent provided by law, may be held liable for any violations of the terms and conditions of this permit, and are responsible for any violation they may have created. And number 12, wetland flagging is to stay in place during the construction process. Missing flags are to be replaced upon the wetland agent's request as required for inspection or enforcement. And anyway, it goes on and on. The next one, number 13, is about bonds. Bonds for all required sediment and erosion controls, restoration, mitigation of disturbed wetlands, watercourses, and regulated areas. The implementation of a construction phase and post-development water quality monitoring report and installation of all conservation easement markers will be determined in the following manner, and then there's a manner for determining that. So I'm running out of time here now, but there are two of these documents, one from Inland Wetlands and one from Planning and Zoning. I suggest if you are interested in the process, if you want to see how fairly the developer was treated and how fairly the town was treated by the developer, you can get these documents and you can see what the conditions are. And then you can, if you want to, follow the progress over the next 5 or 10 years and see how this whole thing works out. So with that, I want to say to you that I probably won't be here next week because it's Thanksgiving. And I wish you all a happy Thanksgiving. As usual, I have a whole family coming to fill my house. All the kids are coming with the grandkids. And we'll go through the normal Thanksgiving. We have plenty to be thankful for. The town also has plenty to be thankful for. And the next budget referendum, our next budget town meeting, will probably be held before I'm back on the air again. So maybe next week isn't when I'm going to be off. I think I will have a program next week. And then I'll be off on Thanksgiving. So next week I'll be back again, probably to talk about the Water and Sewer Commission. Thank you very much.